Hi everybody, my name's James Gilder. I'm curate at St Edmund's Church in Chingford, and I'm also the Environmental Officer for the Diocese of Chelmsford. Before I was ordained, I was a teacher at Morton School, which is a voluntary aided school near to Ongar. Whilst it seems like COVID has kind of pushed every other news item onto the back burner at the moment, I think it remains clear that the immense problems the world faces through climate change are becoming ever more worrying and increasingly apparent. Only last year we saw the terrible wildfires in Australia and California, and only this week we learnt that once again 2020 broke all records as the warmest year ever in the warmest decade ever. And it's clear that we have to act both individually and collectively to put a halt to the damage that is being caused. We can't just ignore it or do the minimum and then hope we've done enough. We've got to have a clear plan and do what is effective, what it takes. So last year, the General Synod of the Church of England, which is kind of like its parliament, its national parliament, the General Synod voted that the whole of the Church of England should move to be carbon neutral by 2030. So that's to say that every part of the church that carries out activities that emit carbon dioxide needs to have either stopped emitting that CO2 or offset what they really can't stop in a decade's time. Now, this is undoubtedly quite an ambitious target, both in terms of the time frame involved and also in terms of the scope of the project, because of course the church is much more than just some church buildings. It also includes all clergy housing, it includes all church offices, halls, and official transport. But also, and crucially why you're watching this video today, it also, of course, includes very much our diocesan schools, or at least in legal terms, it includes voluntary aided schools and those in a diocesan MAT. So for us, the Divine Trust, those schools technically fall under the remit of the Carbon Neutral 2030 project. If you're from a VC school, your buildings, as you no doubt know, are not controlled through the diocese, although of course you're very welcome to be involved. From the data that we've got, we know that the VA and Vine schools in our diocese alone emit over 5,000 tonnes of CO2 every year as a result of their electricity and heating consumption. So that's several thousand tonnes per annum more than all our churches combined, and understandably so, of course, because schools are used day in, day out in a way that most churches aren't. That figure of 5,000 tonnes is not insignificant. And whilst we may not be able to reduce that figure to zero, and certainly not overnight, we do need to start addressing it and fairly rapidly. If schools are going to achieve significant reduction in CO2 output, we've firstly got to be realistic. School budgets are under huge strain, and of course COVID is causing major difficulties, and I'm sure it's likely to go on causing difficulties for schools for some time still to come, unfortunately. Even without a pandemic, schools are already extremely busy places with many conflicting priorities. However, I would suggest to you all that this is really something that we need to take seriously. I know many of you do already, particularly because it's something that the young people we are educating take very seriously. And it's part of our Christian distinctiveness too. We're trying to foster a care for others, care for the world, and a love of our neighbour, wherever our neighbour is around the world, in those whom we teach. And in addressing our carbon consumption, we're taking action which will help to stop something that causes harm and goes against all of those good principles and values. So yes, we have to be realistic as to what we can achieve, Most schools won't have lots of time or cash to throw at this problem. I can't imagine many schools being able to immediately rip out their boiler and install a heat pump, for example. But also we can't let realism be an excuse for not doing anything on this highly important issue. So what can schools do? Well, the first thing that all schools can do is to check that their energy performance certificate is up to date. Since 2008, unless they are very small, all public buildings have required what's called a non-domestic energy performance certificate. These NDEPCs are quite similar to those that you get if you buy a house these days. They entail a surveyor coming to the school and doing an audit of the energy efficiency of the school. And at the end, the surveyor gives a report and an energy rating. This is really useful because it can let you know how efficient your boiler is and whether your school leaks more heat than other schools do. And because the NDEPCs are public documents, it means we can compare different schools' energy performance and identify any that are really using much more energy per square metre of floor space than others. NDEPCs need to be renewed every 10 years for most smaller schools and more regularly for very large buildings. So please do check if your school has fulfilled this legal requirement. Secondly, and really most importantly today, I think, the biggest thing that most schools can do in the short term to reduce their CO2 output is to only use renewable electricity. These days, you don't need solar panels on the school roof to do this. Although, of course, if you want to generate your own electricity, then that's very much an option. However, for most of us, including schools, switching to green energy can be done online with a click of a button. There are various commercial providers such as Octopus Energy, other providers are available, that provide 100% green energy at a similar cost to the big energy suppliers that your school is probably currently with. Schools are quite energy intensive places these days with lots of electrical usage, and probably about 30%, maybe more than that, of your school's carbon output comes from your energy, your electrical energy consumption, maybe 70% from your heating. So just making that easy change away from fossil fuels for your electricity consumption towards a green energy supplier is probably the biggest and easiest thing that everyone can do. Indeed, if all VA and Vine schools did that one thing, just that one thing, we'd be able to cut our total emissions by maybe more than 1,500 tonnes per annum of CO2. And that's with no capital investment in any school at all. So please, if you take one thing away from this video today, please do have a look at who supplies your electricity now, see when your contract ends, and hopefully make some plans to only obtain 100% renewable energy in future. In terms of big hardware changes to heating and stuff like that, I know that many schools are really interested in getting greener heating, generating solar power, and all kinds of other great things. And I know that many of you have expressed a desire to investigate Salix funding further for this purpose. I'm not going to speak at length about that right now, but just to say that there are options available for schools who want to go down this route. And we're really hopeful that Salix and other schemes will expand in future to meet that demand in full. As I said before, climate change is an issue that will probably affect us all, but it's one that the generation of students now in school will probably feel more keenly than any of us. School climate strikes have taken place in schools in this diocese, and I know that many of you here today will have become eco schools or done lots of work on these subjects already with your school community. And I'm aware that some of the stuff that I'm talking about today might seem a bit basic to you, for which I apologise. However, schools making a journey towards being carbon neutral is a great learning opportunity for our pupils. And as a diocese, we're working on some teaching and learning resources that schools can use if they wish to enable pupils to make cross-curricular and cross-cultural links, and give pupils a chance to reflect on the ethical issues involved with this subject, both in their lessons and in collective worship. And I hope that these resources will be available to schools in the relatively near future. In addition to pupil voice on this issue, it would be excellent if your school governors could also be actively involved in creating a plan to move your school to emitting less CO2. I'm not an expert, but my understanding is that it's the governors who actually have overall responsibility for the buildings in a VA school. So your governing body might wish to appoint one of the governors to lead on this issue and to keep your school focused and accountable in making improvements in this area. There's lots more I could say, but I appreciate that right now you as heads have a very great many things to deal with, and you have my eternal respect for doing the immensely difficult and sometimes thankless job that you do, and that you no doubt do so well. But if I could ask you to take away a few things and implement them when you get a chance, I'd be very grateful. So just to recap, those things are: first, check your school's got an up-to-date NDEPC. You can do this either from your own records or by doing a search for your school on ndepc.com. And if you don't have it, or if it's more than a decade old, then please do commission one. They're not very expensive. Second, please do check your electricity contract and make some plans to, if possible, change to a 100% renewable energy supplier. Just a reminder that this is the biggest positive change every school can make without spending any capital. Third, think about ways of incorporating your school's journey to be less carbon intensive into your teaching and learning and into your school's Christian distinctiveness. Your diocesan schools advisor can help you with this if you're unsure, and the diocese is producing some resources at the moment to help you should you wish to use them. And last, get your governors involved in making a plan to lower your school's carbon usage. Think about how the skills of governors might best be used to ensure your school makes progress in this regard. So thank you very much for your time today. Although this video is pre-recorded, I'm on the Zoom call, no doubt cringing at watching myself on a video. Let's face it, no one likes doing that. And I'm going to stick around in case you do have questions. I'm also contactable through the diocese, and if you want to find out more, please just go to the environmental pages on the diocesan main website, and you can email me from there if you'd like. So thank you again for listening, and my prayers and good wishes to you all as you grapple with this, along with everything else in the coming months. Thank you.